What's up? What's up, chat? It's me. Same as it ever was. Except I have a haircut now. That's kind of cool. Uh, Hi, Wobble Dobsy. Hi, Ozzy. Hi, Ishmael. Welcome. It's July. Pride Month is over. It's tragic. I think everyone says during Pride Month that every month is Pride Month if you're a gay person. So I guess it's not a big deal. Everyone's back to being straight. I know. Yeah, gotta take the flag off the wall. Gotta like dress like a straight person. I don't know. Gotta be less gay. It's bad. It's a bad look. Um, Dogs are barking. I don't know if that comes through on the microphone. It probably does. Um, life is great though. I would say I've been doing lots of world building and writing, and auditioning for roles, voice acting, with actually some success. Music, everything is coming up. Uh, whatever the word is. Some success. Yes, I have been maybe tentatively, possibly cast for a small role in a video game. Not certain yet. They haven't like gotten back in a final capacity, and also like video games and projects made by people on the internet have this way of like falling apart. So who knows if that will ever see the light of day? But they did like my audition. Uh, and then I auditioned to voice like a little animation that someone was doing, and they got a bunch of submissions, right? But they left a comment on mine that was like, "Holy shit! Oh my god!" Like all caps, like that kind of message. So I think they liked my voice for the character on that one, which could mean I get cast for that role as well, which is cool. And I've sent off a number of other little recordings that I'm happy with, so that's good. I won't say confident, but happy with my performance. I really like it. I really like acting. Not just voice acting. Voice acting is acting, but like this notion of stepping into another character, of becoming another person. This is something I've thought about for a long time. This idea of becoming someone else. Um, and I finally like made the connection with the act of performance, because performing is to die in some capacity. Performing is to step in front of someone and cease to be human and to become for a moment art, right? To transform from human into art object is kind of my philosophical stance on performance of how that works. And it clicked to me when I understood that half, that when you die, to become art is when you can artistically become another person. Because I had this idea of becoming other people as like an empathetic idea for like since like 2 years ago. It was this phrase that stuck in my mind: becoming someone else. And then only recently have I come to understand performance as death. So now they come together, and I can act, and it just feels very natural to become. And that's super exciting, right? Uh, we got our month. We now return to heteronormalis month. Heteronormality. Yeah. We're back to hetero months for the next 11 months. Gay people don't exist anymore. Trans people don't exist anymore. Uh, Femboys don't exist anymore. Uh, all gone. We have to wait till next June. I'll see you guys on the other side, because I think honestly, we're just not going to be able to stream for the next 11 months until Pride Month again because as a queer person, I no longer exist. So see you in June. It'd be funny if I was ready there and I clicked the thanks for watching screen for a second. But it's like when you leave a Discord call as a joke and then come back. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Reclusi. Nikki, I watched the hit 1995 film Waterworld 2 days ago when I decided not to stream. No, I did not enjoy it, Nikki. I mean, it was like goofy and weird, and I thought there were some moments in it, but predominantly the like I couldn't suspend disbelief, in a way that like was satisfying. I'm like, how do these guys have oil? Where are they getting their oil from? That's like never discussed. How do they have fucking packs of cigarettes? Who's making packs of cigarettes? Who's putting them in packs? And the packs of cigarettes, like, are those paper? Because like paper is like a very valuable commodity. Maybe they were something else, but they looked kind of like they were paper. And like cigarettes are rolled in paper. Um, so there were a number of things that I hadn't actually thought about the cigarettes themselves. Um, but no, I think I thought that like the main lead actor was really kind of bland. Uh, I I mean, he was like kind of hot, I guess, right? I guess both of the leads were pretty hot. Maybe that's the point of the film, is that it's two hot people on a boat and there's a kid there. I thought there were some moments where like there's this boat in this oceanscape and it's really beautiful and almost this like meditation on man and nature and scarcity and sparse vacant reality and impenetrable lonely space. And then it went back to like the actual movie, which was like, you know, like mediocre action scenes. um yeah, that's my thoughts, Nikki, on Waterworld. That being said, Waterworld was excellent inspiration for my world building, my Waterworld, my flooded earth. Because it gave me a lot of things to think about to make sure, like traps that I don't fall into. And I think there are some nice aesthetic things in that film. I thought the boat was really cool, right? The boat was really cool with his like it's sort of uh, weird and implausible again with his like whole, what do they call those machines where like the ball falls down and it hits the other thing and it hits the other thing, and these like contraptions that like unfold. I forgot what those are called, but there were like some moments where the boat was kind of like that. I'm like, this is implausible, but it's really cool, and I like all the metal parts moving around. So you guys don't dig up your own oil and grow your own tobacco. See, it's not even that, Reclusi. It's not even that. In Waterworld 1995, the whole world is flooded. There is like only a tiny bit of dry land, which no one lives on until the very end of the film. Oh no, I spoiled it for you. And plants, plants. There aren't really that many plants. Plants are an incredibly valuable commodity because there's not very much dirt. So, like, you can't even just grow your own tobacco. And you can't even just dig up your own oil because the whole earth is flooded. And somehow there's this faction who live on an aircraft carrier, which is pretty badass. I will say that the aircraft carrier is sick. um, who have oil in cigarettes, and they're called the smokers. And it's just a big problem for me in that movie feeling believable. Is this the Education Center for Freudian Psychology? Welcome back. I don't remember what I'm supposed to call you, Damp Fender. I'll call you Cole, but I think Cabbage. Um, is this the Education Center for Freudian Psychology? Yes. This you've made it back to Twitch's number one rated learning institution for Freudian psychoanalytics and dream interpretation, known as Lotus Freudian Academy of the Mind. Uh, and yes, that's what we do here. It's funny because like you came in for like that last stream where we were just talking about Freud the whole time, and I feel like that's not the most common occurrence on this Twitch stream to talk about Freudian homoerotic your dream interpretation or whatever, and your relationship with your father. But uh, but it can just be a thing now, you know. I think y'all should start. It'd be so fun if any of you have had dreams recently that you enjoyed. You should like write up what your dream was, and then I can read your dream, and I can psychoanalyze you based on your dream, and tell you all the things that are wrong about your mind. That'd be so fun. I would eat that up. Yeah. New category in stream submissions, not just poetry, not just essays, not just prose, dream interpretation. We send poems and Imogen diagnoses us with psychological disorders. Exactly. That I should just be a bit at the end of every submission. I read your thing. Here's what I diagnose you with. And some people, you know, get diagnosed as normies, and some people get diagnosed with all sorts of fun things. Freud was a gay denialist. I can still love Freud and goof on Freud, uh, whatever he believes in, you know. The Mariner is considered a queer icon in cult classic circles. Funny enough. Is The Mariner a film, or is that referring to like the main character of Waterworld? Um, like, does he ever have a name? Hold on. Is Kevin Costner's character is just called the Mariner? He is kind of queer coded. Like he's got like the well, I mean, he's not very queer coded, but he has gills. He's like a freak, right? That's sort of the thing. They call him like a freak, a freaky fish man. So he's kind of like trans coded because he's like a trans species fish mutant, right? Um, I didn't say it in a moralist tone. Oh, I see. Well, tone, internet. He just doesn't have the best basis for homoerotic analysis. But I do. But I do. That's what you associate the channel with now. Cole Cabbage. That's crazy. Oh well. I did that once. Genuinely could share it. You did a dream analysis, or you just wrote up your dream? I write up my dreams sometimes. Sometimes I just put them in haiku. Uh, but I am I'm certainly open to dream interpretations on this stream, as someone who has attempted to interpret their own dreams, and I love symbol association, of course, as an analyzer of art. So can't have poetry channel without severe mental illness. I mean, that's kind of why it'd be fun, right? It's kind of why it'd be fun. 2 days ago, I accidentally dropped a 20-pound note, 20 euro. Sorry, it's a euro, not a pound. My bad. Don't hate me. 20 euro note in a puddle. Oh, in a dream. And it apparently startled me so much that I almost woke up. Uh, yeah. So that actually means, right, that you have this deep-seated attachment to money, and that's not to blame. I think societally this is the case, and to drop even a small amount, just 20 euros, is shocking and terrible. And the puddle, right, water, this sort of still dark water on the ground, within your mind is probably Probably, I mean, first of all, just a representation of loss, right? We associate water with tears and that sort of pain and that loss. But water also has this, fundamental association with entropy, right? The ocean, a destructive force. So really, that's a representation of the world, that you are helpless to the world and its natural forces around you, maybe even the forces of capitalism, which seem to be picking your pocket and constantly stealing money from you in a way that you cannot control, in a way that is, you know, so much greater than you. A sublime force of nature is what capital has turned into. And you've clearly awoken to that reality. And I think that means, going forward, you would want to sort of reanalyze your understanding of economics and politics, and maybe take action against that. I think this dream tells you that you're a socialist. So, Cabbage, it's time to get involved in your community and start supporting your local labor groups. um, thank you. That's my interpretation of your dream. Wrote in my dream, or at least broke down an especially memorable and vivid one that I thought could turn into a story. That's super cool. Hi, Ray. This dream tells you you're a socialist. Yeah, that was the whole goal. Ray, I watched Water Worlds. I was talking about it a second ago, but it was useful to watch, and it was a terrible movie. It was absolutely pouring last week, so that's where the puddle came from, almost certainly. Yeah. I also really like money, so there's that. Yeah, and I think, the rain is this thing that stops you from going out into the world, stops you from engaging in the world of capital because you become depressed and unproductive. Actually, so we're gonna have a capitalist reading of this dream. So rain and these forces in the world, these things that drown you in your human reality, fundamentally stop you from being your most productive alpha male grind set self, right? And if we transcended nature, and if we transcended the human form, and transcended the weakness of flesh, right? Water, the mind, the body, we're 70-80% water. If we could surpass that and become something new, then you'd be able to escape the limits of flesh and your human non-productivity. Me and productive? Exactly. You're not productive because of the limitations of your human flesh. I mean, you're so weak that the rain can depress you and get into your dreams and take $20 from you as if it is nothing. I mean, come on. We must become a transhuman robot people. Two rather different interpretations of that dream. From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh. Exactly. um, Moving water, sure, that can represent erosion, but I think the puddle could be fear that capitalism and selfishness associated with it is inevitable and unchanging. It's collected, it's stagnated. The modern system of capital is stale, tepid, unmoving, stagnant, and full of mosquitoes. You know what I'm quoting there? I know the quote, and I don't remember what it's from the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh. Um, but I will paste it in. Uh, oh, a Warhammer. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That makes sense. I'm not a Warhammer person. I'm surrounded by Warhammer people in my life, so I that's why I know the quote. Um, but yeah, I've never. I was Magic the Gathering, and then if you're into Magic the Gathering and Warhammer, you have to be like you have to have a lot of spare change to be into two collectible hobbies. Actually, my two were D&D and Magic, and I stopped buying things related to Dungeons and Dragons about 3 or 4 years ago. So you know, uh, yeah. I mean, some of y'all make it work. Uh, I've never been more aware of my flesh prison body as I am in this stream. That's good. That's good. I'm here to enlighten you about you know technological acceleration and the future that stands before us. No, 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 no. I love the flesh. I love humans. Humans are fucking awesome. And I don't want to replace myself with robots. If I read your story today, it's Warhammer related. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Can't have shit in Glasgow. The rain took 20 euro from me. Yeah. Hello there, poetry adoring specimens. Hello, face your fear. Welcome in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'd say is it time to get to some reading? I think so. I think so. Yes. Yes it is. Okay, Ishmael. Uh what is this reading thing? Um um it's like the um not sure. Not sure. I think my brain usually sort of shuts off and becomes vacant and goes somewhere else as soon as I like open someone's poem, and Imogen leaves the room and some other sort of more primal force steps into my body and mind, and and we go from there, you know. Who has things submitted to me? Who has things? Also, guys, I'm like so stoked about my haircut. Uh, it looks roughly the same, but some of this here is right shorter. I really yeah shorter right where the stuff here got cut so it like frames my face. These used to be like very long and just went all the way down and they look terrible. Uh, but like now I've got these guys. I love these guys. This is like yeah, I dig it. You receive linguistic information through visual medium ordered through inscripted symbols. See, I was like contemplating coming up with something like that, Ishmael, and saying it, but my brain was moving too slowly because my stomach hurts. And I was thinking about how my stomach hurts instead of like I got symbols and I got visual. I didn't quite put it all together in time. So you left a translation. I do, but I'm pretty sure I already made that clear. I'm pretty sure you did, Alec man. Well, I guess it's not been long enough just yet for the second part of your chapter. I mean, it kind of has been. Um, I will bite the bullet and say you read when observing sign language. Well, I don't know if like linguists would agree with you. Um, I don't. I'm not sure if it would like within the brain, like what sort of faculties are being used, if they're more actual, um akin to like a spoken language because it does have this motor skill thing, but it is visual, right? Um, what is up, G14? Welcome in. We are just about to jump into some submissions, so I don't know if you've sent anything in at all, but I think we're gonna start with this. Maybe this Alec man um thing. I don't think I've read anything from you before, and I think Ishmael probably I should read soon. Oh, you have your poem in a language you don't know. That'll be interesting. Um, Not much. I watched a video about the Trojan War. That's cool. Uh, that's like that's like the Iliad, right? I had an essay on language and the philosophy around it. Posted it and then insta deleted it because I found a mistake. That's so real. That's fair. All right. All right, guys. Short fiction feedback request part one from Alec Man. There's a short little the screen is black. It surprises me every time, even though it happens every time. Okay. There's like a amble here, an ambulatory sort of thing. It says, for context, this was written as a prologue for a narrative campaign game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar between myself and my two friends. I would have wrote more if we actually played more than a small handful of games, but these prologues are all intended to establish our chosen factions for the tabletop and add some texture and narrative flair to help immerse them in the story. So you were trying to like do storytelling with Warhammer, which is cool as fuck. I don't really know much about how Warhammer is played because I've never played it, but that's cool. You're doing like an RPG basically through the war game. First part was my faction, which are cities of normal humans enduring the best they can in a world of unholy terrors and armies of the undead, where even demigods can only do so much to hold civilization together. As a result, much of this will leverage knowledge of the lore, since my friends already have varying amounts of knowledge. So this is sort of like fan fiction in some capacity. I say that in no derogatory sense. I love fan fiction. Um, I'm looking for anything. It's feedback on how I could have better conveyed the internal political strife in my city. Those with familial history in the city represented by mages and scholars, and those from another realm that give them financial industry and military aid represented by the church. Okay. Um, cool. Because there are different realms, to give a reductive but quick overview of the realms and their planets with their own magical themes. Because I know this is rough. It was the first piece of fiction I wrote in over 5 to 6 years, not counting plots for my D&D groups. Gotcha. Okay, so it is a prologue, essentially, to an RPG experience told through the mechanical lens of Warhammer, and we have not that much. I'm going to take some screenshots of this so I can do my scribbling upon it. I think that is better since it's only 4 pages, and I love that this is double spaced. That's just so random. I understand. I understand in this moment why teachers, why like the school standard is like double spacing. Like you can write on it. It's so much more like readable. I feel like, look, this is my world building. Um, this is my world building for flooded Earth. I was starting with the borders of the new nation of Mexico because all of this gets flooded. They expand a little bit up into Arizona as far as like Flagstaff or something, or yeah, Kingman. And then like this is New Zion, the like unified fascist Christian daughter of America. Anyway, working on that stuff. There will be more in the future. There's a chance, and we'll say a quite small chance that at the end of some point toward the end of this stream, I might just do some world building on stream. But like also probably not. Might be like a further in the future thing. But I am very excited about this world and this campaign that I'm starting to write. So hopefully maybe we'll start seeing more of it on stream if that's something that I find myself enjoying. Um okay. So um lurking, enjoy the lurk cabbage. Okay, you sent a bunch of things, Alec, man. Let me put these pictures in actually. Okay. You said a bunch of big words. Okay, I haven't read something of yours before. This is very new. Yeah, I like to read stuff from new people because it's like new. Yes, because there's a dedicated narrative game mode where you manage your army between games with others, go on quests, and get more power to enhance your units you wouldn't get in competitive play. That's really cool. I having never played Warhammer, it's really neat to me. I always, really associated Warhammer with the just war game part, but it makes sense to me that people would naturally want to use it as a way to tell stories, especially because like the people who play Warhammer are the same nerds who play D&D and who play Magic. Has anyone wait, this is like a fast has anyone ever created like a truly like narrative way to play Magic the Gathering? I wonder if there's a way to do that. That's like totally just I've never thought about that before. Right? Like people make uh custom like ways to play Magic and stuff, right? What if there was like a some sort of way to like I mean you have like these like deck building like roguelikes, right? You have these like Slay the Spire type games that have like some amount of story. Um and I wonder if you could sort of create some sort of way to do a campaign that's like using game mechanics. I don't know how that would work. Anyway, it would probably be quite difficult to construct. You forgot to tag it fan fiction. Yeah, the tags don't really matter. Uh, Apparently Troy's leader IRL had a name similar to the modern Alexander. That's cool. Random historical anecdote of the day. Um, yeah, I mean you can like play D&D in Magic settings. I've run multiple campaigns in Ravnica, but like that's not like using the Magic mechanics. This section is not that much because I split it up between different faction prologues. Sure. So it's like the faction for the humans, I think. If you want, I can send you a version that covers all three. No, this is fine for now for this submission. It's much longer. That's exciting. Always good to have more. Yeah, Magic has also like crossed over with narrative games, right? Final Fantasy, The Hobbit, or Lord of the Rings. So yeah, Plane Chase made an attempt. I suppose Plane Chase did make an attempt, right? That was before I ever played Magic, so I've never played Plane Chase. I think there was a hero and monster game released during Theros block. Oh, they were like these decks. Theros is when I started. I actually have these. They're called like Battle the Hydra. Um, and then there's the one where you have to like kill Xenagos, the god. And then there's another one. I don't remember what the other one is. But the decks sort of like draw cards and play themselves. and they have like special rules where they're like creating creatures and stuff on the board, and you have to like attack. Uh, yeah, those were sick. I still have them. I could pull them out later if someone reminds me, but yeah, they were really cool. Um, Someone else made an MTG single player roguelike mode, but I need to find it again. That's all very cool. I think there's a super unpopular PS1 game. Yeah, I bet. Uh I'm I'm probably gonna make an RPG system for the world and the campaign that I'm running. Uh but I don't know what to do mechanically yet. The faction is called Cities of Sigmar. If you want to look up their model range to get at least a rough understanding, yeah, we can look up Warhammer models on my stream. Uh, uh, what are they called? Age of Sigmar? Age of Sigmar. All right. Wait. Warhammer. Age of Sigmar. Okay. Wait. No, isn't that like the. Wait. Is that what they're called? No, Cities of Sigmar. Shit. Age of Sigmar is the game. Uh, okay. Hold on. Cities. Cities. Okay. Man, I need another USB port so I can like so I can have my keyboard plugged in while I do this. Okay, Cities of Sigmar. Dude, these guys look like knights. This is like some what the fuck is going on here? The ticker. I'm like, what if I want to click on one of these things? That's a really funny website bug. I've never seen a site do this before, where it's just it's funny. Okay, so they are genuinely like. Let's look at Galen and Duralia Van Denst. Guys, I can spend 37 pounds on two miniatures. There's some nice ass minis. I would love to paint these guys. I do really like painting minis. I haven't done it in a long time because I stopped buying minis and all of that. But let's look at Spearhead because there's a lot here. Okay, they straight up have palanquins, whatever you call these things. Look at that. Oh, there's like a little dragon guy. Candles. Good vibes. Definitely good vibes. Uh, yeah, capes and armor and swords. I don't know, like, don't they have like laser guns in Warhammer? Or is that 40K? And this is like Warhammer before it's sci-fi. Because I know Warhammer has like different eras, right? And maybe 40K is sci-fi with tanks and shit, right? And then maybe Age of Sigmar is fantasy. Ah, dude, the Lord of Whoa. Look at this guy. I don't even know what that is. It's the Lord of Hysteria, I guess. I love how you can like build the minis differently. That's always so cool to me. That they have like different faces and stuff. I guess that's why it's like a 27 pound, whatever that is in dollars miniature. Okay, yeah. Sigmar is fantasy Warhammer. Gotcha. Um okay. So we've got like some knights and they're like surviving against the terrifying horrifying horrors of the world, and we're going to read a little prologue, and basically we're going to see if this gets us hyped up to want to like functionally like play in this RPG campaign. I think is sort of the idea. This makes me think of when me and my friends when our D&D group starts a new game, or when we finish a campaign. All of us like to DM now. I was the original DM, and I basically got like kicked out. Not kicked out, but other people wanted to DM. So now whenever we finish a campaign, we all like basically write a pitch, and we all sort of like vote on which campaign we're most interested in. So this idea of having like a prologue for this kind of thing to get the players kind of hyped up and interested is definitely something that I am fairly familiar with even doing myself. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um let's read this. Let's read some basically Warhammer RPG fan fiction badass stuff. And it's just told in the form of prose, which I think is cool. Prologue. The Conclave's Decision. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of incense and the sound of murmured voices. Lorien could feel the anticipation building as he stepped through the double doors into the central chamber of Grasping Hollow's Grand Conclave. The members all sat in their designated seats, partitioned on either side of the chamber by an open space between them where a small podium was set up, bisecting the chamber perfectly down the middle. Lorien stared out at the awaiting faces of these influential men and women, people who alone could change the lives of any one person in the city. But Lorien Vortimus aspired to more. And for that to happen, he needed the whole conclave. He'd spent months preparing for this. Now he was going to make it count. He just needed to organize his notes and his thoughts. He'd gone over his presentation hundreds of times. He just needed to... What is Branch Master Gilbar Belstroy? Gilbar. Are you ready to begin, Mr. Vortimus? The question came from Branch Gilbar Belstroy, head of the Collegiate Arcane in Grasping Hollow, and Lorien's former professor. The question was calm. Okay, voice was not correct. Almost understanding, but left little room for further time or deliberation. So far, I mean, I like your writing. You set the scene nicely, right? You place us within this conclave, and I'd imagine your readers, your intended audience, maybe also already has some conception in their head of what this place looks like. Maybe, I don't know if there's like official art, let's say, of Grasping Hollow and its Grand Conclave. But I think it does a good job in this opening of sort of describing the room and his, I like, right, the heavy scent of incense, the sound of murmured voices. We're using our sort of five senses to set the scene. And yeah, I think one thing is like, you have this, the members sat and they're designated. You're sort of describing like the layout. But so something I've heard recently, and this is a piece of advice that I really like myself. I'm not sure if everyone would agree with this advice, but it comes from Kurt Vonnegut, who says when you're writing fiction, everything you put on the page must contribute to one of two things. It either contributes toward the action, something is happening, we're moving the plot forward, or it contributes to characterization. So either making the world or a person or a setting more vibrant, more beautiful, right? Giving more kind of vibes. It's funny because we were talking about a piece by Callie a few streams ago, and I was talking about how I wanted things to focus on action and character. And then I heard this interview from Vonnegut. So So maybe you could think about, right? You need to describe the layout of the room because I think we need to understand where we are, right? And maybe there's a way to tell us more about the conclave themselves or the people. I don't know if the conclave people are called the conclave, but the members, right? Maybe there's some reason why the members are partitioned half and half on one side or the other. Maybe you could tell us a snippet about their clothing, uh, or something to characterize, right? Or maybe Lorian's. Like I like this next line, right? He's staring out at them. It's sort of intimidating. That they're influential, that they could alone change the lives. I love this line. I think that's a good way to illustrate their power and kind of what he's going before, and and maybe in that sense, this line like contributes to that in some way, positions them above him. Even to just say that they're above is characterization. They're sitting on something raised because it places them above and him below, right? A slight sort of symbolic aspect to the setting. There isn't. Grasping Hollow is a city of my own creation. There are official cities in lore like Hammerhall or Greywater Fastness. I have heard of Greywater Fastness for some reason. But this was my own idea, and Warhammer lore is open enough that you can just do that. Hell, it's encouraged in several ways. Gotcha. Um, and then I think, that's that's cool, right? So the cool thing about fan fiction, right, is these people are associated with the cities of whatever it was, Sigmar, right? So cities of Sigmar, and the cities of Sigmar have like an aesthetic and a vibe, right? This is just me talking about stuff. This isn't really like critique or anything, but just ideas. Um, you know, Cities of Sigmar has an aesthetic, right? They have like those capes and they have swords and they have like royalty and probably people who are lower. They have like this maybe like European fantasy kind of vibe. But the cool thing about fan fiction is you get this sort of flexibility to take this and highlight the parts of this that you really like, right? To focus on certain things, to add more detail to the aesthetics that are given to you. And I think, I mean, by creating your own city and your own places, I think you're already doing that, right? So, but that's, I think, something to keep in mind with fan fiction is assumptions exist as a shorthand, but we can also like build upon the assumptions in the lore, um, as much as we also like work around it. Fair. Describing the layout was supposed to establish the division I described earlier. Reclaimed city natives and wizards on one side, with members of the church and Azerites from the realm of Azur on the other, showing a literal division. Yeah, and I think even right to weave that into a sentence like this tells you something interesting. And it also maybe when you bring in someone like Branchmaster Gilbar Belstroy, we're going to give him a voice like that instead of the one I did before because he's like calm and academic. Um, you know, he is necessarily associated with one of these two factions. And maybe, right, he is calm, he's understanding, he has this connection with Lorien, right? So when we place him on one side, it maybe shows that like he's probably partial to Lorien. Maybe not, right? Because he has this connection. But that could mean that like there's a faction within the conclave that is Branchmaster and like this party, and then you have the other party on the other side, right? And you could have this thing where like maybe Lorien is mostly agreeable to these people, but he needs to convince these people, right? And that does a really job of like framing your character's desire, right? They want to convince the whole council. And by kind of splitting them in a way, so it's not just like however many people. Does it say how many people there are? I think I'm like imagining maybe something like 30 um, it reduces it, right? Where he has allies and he has enemies in this scene, which is like a useful thing in writing. That being said, I did commission the heraldry for Grasping Hollow, but I don't have art for the city itself. That's so cool. You got heraldry going. That's badass. Okay, and you say yeah, exactly. So you're probably setting it up this way, and I think if it would be really helpful to your case, right? If line two, you start to set up this division. I mean, you set up the division, right? You're talking about the partition and the idea of dividedness. Uh, but if you can really bring in this important dynamic, right, clearly and early, I think that helps you because that's like tension. Good guys, bad guys. So, are you ready to begin, Mr. Vortimus? The question came from Branch Master Gilbar Bellstroy, head of the Collegiate Arcane in Grasping Hollow and Lorien's former professor. The question was calm, almost understanding, but left little room for further time or deliberation. Yes, Branch Master, Lorien spoke, his tone even, measured, and revealed little to nothing about his emotions to the conclave, as he'd needed to if he wanted to succeed here. Esteemed members of the conclave, I come before you today with a proposal, one that will elevate our city to a foundational pillar of the God King's illustrious empire. I have unearthed records of a valuable treasure hidden within Kamon, an artifact that would bring our city untold prosperity in knowledge and in wealth. So I like this because this is probably setting up your like RPG, right? Your TTRPG. We're gonna go find the valuable treasure, and that's maybe one of our like quests. So again, that's like one of your main points, and I think it's really important within like short fiction, and especially short fiction that's really trying to like sell someone on something, to have these ideas be short and communicable and like present at the start, so we just know. You don't want to like babble on about the 1300-year lineage in Grasping Hollow because you need to tell your players about your world building, right? You want to be like, let's get in on the action. So I think that's good. As for Gilbar, he's chiming in because he notices that his student is getting in his own head. He's trying to subtly help without making it look like he's playing favorites to the rest of the conclave. As for size, I was imagining a group of about 10 to 14 people. Gotcha. I think that's a really cool feeling, right? This idea of like subtly making him start. Now, I think there's a question, right, of like, I don't think that's communicated by the text personally, right? I think it makes sense once explained, but it didn't like jump off the page to me. I'm not sure this necessarily would want to be edited to like sort of expound upon the dynamic between the professor and Lorien, because we are just trying to like get to the action, and it seems like probably a detail that's a bit subtle and a bit tangential to like our aim here, right? Which is to sell the players on this premise in this world. Now, I think if we were writing like a novel, and this was the opening to a novel, we could definitely dwell for a page or a paragraph on, or expand this by a paragraph to get this cool idea that he's becoming a bit overwhelmed, a bit in his head, he's thinking too much, and then the professor's voice kind of cuts through that haze, forces him to start, and then he finds his stride just by beginning, right? Because that's a very cool idea. I think a good kind of creative dialogue thing. Lore note, Hamon, Hamon, like in JoJo's, is another realm. It's the realm of the dead. Oh wait, it's the realm of metal grasping hollow in the realm of death. Okay, realm of metal grasping hollow. Oh, I see, I see. Hamon is in the realm of metal. Grasping hollow is in the realm of death. Gotcha. Fair. I didn't go too deep into lore details that would actually be explained for potential readers that don't know the lore because I wanted to get to the action. Chamon. Okay. Well, I'm allowed to mispronounce things. Hamon. They're French now. uh, Chaman. Chaman. Yeah, I think getting to the action is a good objective here, right? And I think this is why it's useful, right, as writers in general. Useful as writers in general to know our objective. If we have an objective, we don't need to have an objective. But in this case, the objective really helps us. The objective says, I want to, get my player excited. Right? That's really the goal here. I want my friends to be like stoked about this world. And that would be my goal. And this means we have like a number of priorities, and that's like action, right? That's like setting. With action sort of like the premise, like what we're setting up for, what we're going to be involved in, right? We want maybe more of like a bird's eye view as opposed to like a, really zoomed in, granular. This is the relationship of the professor and the guy, right? Whereas we can have other objectives. I was listening last night to a interview with Toni Morrison, and her first book, which is called like something to do with like blue eyes. I don't remember what the name of the book is, but Toni Morrison, great author. I've only read Song of Solomon, but like great author. Holy shit. Toni Morrison, her objective with her first book was I want to write the book I want to read. Right? She had this idea. She wanted to write the Black experience in the Midwest in America because she had never read a book like that reflected her experience. And so this probably meant a number of things. This meant like a degree of like honesty. This meant she said that she approached her writing from the perspective of a reader. She edited the book for like 5 years because she would just read it and find things she didn't like to read. The Bluest Eye. And so she would go back and edit it again and just be like, okay, well, I need this to read better because it's writing the book I want to read. And it meant that she didn't really have like that specific audience to consider, but it meant she considered sort of her own priorities. And of course, if we were to write this with the ethic of write the fantasy story I want to read, then I certainly would include like all the little details inside the mind of the professor. And I think if we wrote, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye as something to get our players hyped for the premise of a role-playing game in the campaign setting of the Black experience in the American Midwest, The Bluest Eye would be written very, very differently, right? So these objectives can help us, and they can restrict our writing in a way that shapes it into something more effective, right? And that's cool. Okay, right. This is sort of, I actually think this is very similar in feeling to a movie trailer, right? We're trying to get people excited. movie trailer where, if you see a movie trailer, you want to know like the premise of the world. You want to like see some action to get you excited. You want to know like who your characters are, sort of seeing the actors. You want to know what you're in for, right? And that means covering the details. But your movie trailer isn't going to be like 50% of it being like some intimate conversation that happens at the 3/4 mark of the movie that is dependent on a lot of the context around it, you know. So anyway, back to this. Back to this. Uh, Wait a minute. You said Chamon? The low, surly voice of Lord Bulmar cut into Lorien's presentation with all the finesse of a drunk Auric, with all the force. How did you manage to find this? Wait, is this still him? I think that's Lorien. I'm trying to get the voices. How did you manage to find this record all the way out there? The only reason anyone from Grasping Hollow would find something from Bleeding Chamon is if they were on a crusade there. And we all know what happened to the crusade sent to Chamon, don't we? He certainly knew how to cut to the point. Lorien gave him that. But he expected someone like Bolmar to open their mouth. But he expected someone like Bolmar. Oh, I see. But he expected someone like Bolmar to open their mouth. Yes, I found it on a crusade, with the main route to our destination blocked by a checkpoint of bone reapers. We needed to cross a mountain range not found on any of our maps. The locals called it the Auric Jaws. We weren't prepared for them. The terrain was treacherous, our navigation tools rendered useless by their strange ambient magic, and to make things worse, we were ambushed by followers of the Change God. Those of us that escaped with our lives only did so just barely. Lorien struggled to maintain his even tone as the screams of his burning comrades and the cackling of cruel sorcerers echoed in his ears. Oryx are the name for orcs. That makes sense. See, this is another thing in our movie trailer, right? You're setting up the dangers that your players will be facing, right? Or that you'll be facing cooperatively together. We're going to the Auric Jaws. There will be the cult of the Change God. There will be sorcerers. There will be death. It's a dangerous place to go. So you ran then? Bulmar asked as a contented, almost sadistic sneer spread across his sagging face. I survived, Lord Audacious. Before we were attacked, I investigated the ruins we'd set up in camp on the inward slope of the mountains. There, I found this. From his robe, Lorien pulled out a glowing tablet of solid gold. Engraved upon its surface were words written in an ancient language. One Lorien had spent nearly a year and many drops of his own life water to translate. O ye mortal, what lives for knowledge, prosperity, and power, hear ye this. At the center of the 3 golden fangs doth lie the tomb of Ogonus the Wise, the last king of the Gilded Eye. Only those worthy of his legacy shall master his trials and leave with the Gilded Eye as their own. I fled back. I fled the field to bring this tablet back to Grasping Hollow, to have these words shared with all of you today. We were unprepared before, but if we return and find this Gilded Eye, its legendary power will belong to Sigmar and all of Grasping Hollow. It could turn the tide in our war with the Duke. The Conclave's members erupted in sudden discussion. Lorien's mention of his home's most hated enemy was a calculated one. It stopped Bulmar's belligerent verbal assault, but few mortals in Grasping Hollow spoke of the Duke so flippantly and lived long enough to do so a second time. Once their many voices quieted, Lorien seized the initiative, his voice almost reverberating with passion and vigor. All I ask is that you spare the troops and supplies necessary to fund this expedition. You have copies of the records and historical documents proving that King Ogonus's power was no mere story. The Gilded Eye is out there. We only need the means to claim it. Let us turn the failures of the past into the successes of our future. I think your I like his speech. I like how the speech kind of has direction. I think sometimes this can be an issue with like writing long dialogue is it doesn't have like a flow to it. And but this one, right, it starts sort of even a little bit timid. Are you ready? We have the softer, voice of the professor, and then we build up when Mr. Drunk Auric comes in, Lord Bolmar, and he builds it, and we're like, oh, we're pushing, we're building the intensity, and then it sort of pulls back down as he explains, but then it pushes back up because now we're like describing, you know, this new thing, this curiosity, this action, and then right we push it kind of explodes and then we get vigor and he's like really oratory, right? um and then we, and that's where we are now. So I think it has a good direction. Sorry, I had to step away for a minute and come back to the ads. Did I miss anything in the last minute or two? Just that we got up to like sort of the end of this speech part, uh, and that I was saying I like how the speech is written, that it has sort of a direction to it. It begins softer, it builds up and swells and pulls back, and then kind of pushes to this end. And I think that works quite well. I don't remember what I was saying before that, if anything of value. So funny thing about that, the cult was not one of the factions used by the other players. They were going to be a secret NPC faction that I would bring into the game and story at certain points. That makes sense, right? They're seen as this like adversary in the mountains, so it seems fitting. From there, Lorien was able to present the rest of his case to the conclave without any further interruption. Once again, he found himself waiting outside their chambers contemplating, poring over his records, rereading the tales he'd so painstakingly transcribed from High Neolithic into Azurite. Anything to help him keep his mind off the possibility that they'd vote against him, that his months of effort and the lives of his fellow crusaders were all not spent in vain. When suddenly he heard an old familiar voice beside him. "You did well, Lorien. As well as can be expected, at least." Lorien was almost surprised to hear his old master standing in front of him suddenly like this. "I thought I should be the one to tell you this. You might not like all of it." For a moment Lorien's heart sank into his chest. "We approved your request." Lorien suddenly became alert. He could scarcely believe it was real. He stood up, set his notes and materials down in the chair he was seated in, and looked at his old mentor in the eyes. "That's great news, Branchmaster. What won't I like? Could they not spare the troops? Are there not enough rations for an expedition of this size? What? The Conclave doesn't think you're properly equipped for full military command. So you've been assigned an adjunct. He's a veteran of 3 prior crusades and countless skirmishes with the Duke's undead. Some say he's set to rise to the Conclave with another major accolade to his name. Aurelius Van Brecht. He's a staunch supporter of the Azurites. He's respected by many, and I suspect they chose him because he doesn't steal command of the operation from you. Because if he doesn't steal command of the operation from you, if it fails, it'll reflect poorly on the Collegiate Arcane. Watch yourself, Lorien." "I will, sir." "Good lad. Now get going. You've got troops to marshal, and an artifact to find. With that, Lorien turned, gathering his materials, and stepped out of the conclave building. Now, the real work was about to begin. End of our little prologue. I think it's great. Yeah, it's like short, it's snappy, it gets to the point. It creates some internal tension in the story between like Lorien and Brecht. It I like the sort of success with a twist. I think that's always excellent. I think if he just got the funding, it would be sort of like, okay, cool. But when you add a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of tension, it makes us want to keep pushing forward into the story. And I think that's really well done. Even if within, the actual game that you play, maybe that whole dynamic won't be explored that much. I don't know. Um, just having that tension makes us want to keep reading, and in this case to start playing, right? To start playing the RPG, and that's a really good move, right? The cliffhanger is such a fundamentally useful tool in storytelling because it pulls us along, wants to push us forward, and if we're thinking about this sort of movie trailer wanting to hook someone, making them have this desire to know what comes next would be very useful for you, right? Yes, this is another thing I could have done better, because what was going through my head is Lorien gets oratory here because he had to prep for it to appeal to the church and Azorites, since they like that kind of zeal. It's even why he said that the eye would be obtained for Sigmar, before saying it was for the city. It was a calculated move to show the conclave his faith. But I didn't explain or explore that in the story itself. Yeah, and I think that's okay, right? I do think that's fine that you didn't explore all that. I think if we were writing this literarily, yeah, that background would be great. This probably also maybe wouldn't be. I mean, it could be the opening scene of a book. I could also see it working very well with like a lot of setup and a lot of things leading up to it. But I think for the sake of what this is, right, it does really well, and those sort of details might bog down, I think, the very effective movie trailer snappiness of this. Right? It shows him, it shows his support, it shows some opposition. That sort of explains why it's a pseudo success, and it creates, the opportunity for the tension and the cliffhanger. It shows that he has allies and enemies within. So I think it does a lot of things really well. But knowing the intent makes me feel a bit better about it. Sure, yeah. Someone dropped chips in the parking lot. Pick them up and eat them. Yes, there was supposed to be moments and conversations between the two if I wrote any more parts of it. But I was kind of kicking myself for not showing here. I wasn't sure if it'd be better to have Lorien and Aurelius meet each other and butt heads, showing their rivalry before it gets to the game part of the campaign. I mean, that's certainly something you could do, but it would require a whole nother scene, and I think it would probably feel very fast, right? Because you have to introduce a whole nother character and their tension, and then like show some of their tension. Where I think this does enough of a job of, at least for me, like I was sort of reading this thinking like, would I want to play this game? And I think it gives me, the reader, a number of reasons to want to play this, right? It gives me tension to look forward to. It does a good job of setting up the goal, and that there's going to be some dangerous stuff that I have to go fight with my Warhammer army, and there's going to be some internal tension, and gonna have some allies in the university. Like it covers, right? Premise, action, characters. That was at least a few of the things that I said you would see in a movie trailer. You picked up the chips with your tornado powers. Awesome, Callie. You had a dream that you were dating a bunch of Greek goddesses, and it gave me superpowers. So you weren't even here earlier when we were doing our Freudian psychoanalytic dream analyses. But that one is almost certainly with your internal relationship to the feminine and your your past relationship with your mother. Fair. Glad to know that I understood the assignment, and I was just being a bit too self-critical by treating it like a short story or part of a larger project and not a movie trailer as you described. Yeah, and I think it's tricky as a writer because this feels like it could be a really great little short, like a great short story if we expanded it out by, double or triple or quadrupling the word count. Like it could be quite a cool little scene. It could be a very functional scene within a larger novel. And I think, the literary mind of us as writers jumps to those places. And that's where if we can identify, right, our objective, you know, I want this to be a movie trailer, and you frame it within that, then the sort of critique changes. Because, right, critique, I think, is about not making a piece better, because this is hard to pin down. Critique is about understanding, a piece's goals, and then once we understand the goals, right, critique looks like an approach to communicating those goals better, right? And if we're thinking about self-critique, right, we can self-critique. And I think your self-critique, as you say, was sort of slightly misguided in a way, because you were self-critiquing it as something it was not. Your self-critique didn't have your own goals in mind. And so I think that's a useful thing when we're thinking about our own work. I mean, it's easy to just sort of idly look at our own stuff and be like, this is bad, this can do this can get better, this is worse, whatever, But I think it almost makes me think of like this desire as an educator, we'll say, because I think of myself as a teacher, right? To make, like, we'll call it a worksheet, I think this should exist, right? The self-critique worksheet, as someone who is interested in the process of improving art, right? Because they're like these important questions to ask, what is my goal, right? Do I have an audience, which is similar to goal? And then it starts looking at, like, what parts don't I like? And then you ask, is there anything about those parts that isn't contributing to your goal? And then if you don't find anything, then maybe you need to reevaluate your goals, or you realize that it's not actually as bad as you thought it was. Maybe it's just, not satisfying from a technical standpoint. But I feel like there's a way to actually, like, sort of pedagogically construct a process here. And this is something that I find very lacking in writing historically, as I've experienced people talking about writing, and I've been to lots of poetry workshops, and they're very, like, intuitive, and they're very, like, read this thing and then, like, sort of, like, look at the techniques and try it yourself. It's very, like, active. but I feel like I see less of these less pedagogy applied to writing. Pedagogy, the study of teaching, things like this. And then when people do pedagogy in writing, I feel like sometimes it just ends up being this problem where you get like the professor, right? You get the professor who has their idea about what art is. And their idea of art has like these certain right and wrong, which is really just their preference. And I don't know. I haven't gone to school for writing or anything, um, because I dropped out and stuff. But I feel like it'd be very valuable, from my perspective, right, to create this sort of like consistent and free pedagogy constructed around not the idea of something arbitrarily right or wrong, right, but about one's own preference, one's own goals, one's own objectives as a writer generally. Because I think a lot of this same stuff can sort of apply to poetry if you change a few of the words. Yeah. Welcome, Moin Khan. Hello, hello. We're just sort of finishing up reading a we'll call it an excerpt of a fantasy thing, a D&D, not D&D, a tabletop RPG campaign primer, basically, a movie trailer, so to speak. Yeah, but what we do here is people send me stuff from chat, I read it, I scribble on it, I talk about it, I give feedback if people want. I talk about the things that I just want to talk about anyway and sort of scribble, and talk about poetry and writing and art more broadly. I'm best at poetry, but but we've been getting better at doing more prose. And my thing is like frozen. It's not working. That's annoying. Alekman, you said, after discovering your channel, I genuinely might. You might do something. I don't remember what. I actually think that movie trailer quality will fall apart once you get to the other two factions. They're longer, more detailed, and a bit more ambitious. And the stories I was/more proud of from a traditional writing standpoint. But after this, they might genuinely be worse movie trailers. See, that's really interesting, right? And if you were to go back and edit those, you could, think about them like as in that same way. How are these serving my purpose to get my players excited? Will my players be excited about the very, I don't know, sort of literary, nuanced dialogue and world building and tiny microscopic drama? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the other ones later, right? And keep talking about that. My ambition is often the downfall as scope creep settles in. I mean, it's hard, right? It's hard as writers because we fucking love our world building, right? Most of us who world build, because world building is like really just exploring a world that we're interested in. I don't think anyone world builds worlds that they hate, right? Now, the issue is that all of the things that interest us as world builders, right, doesn't necessarily interest someone else, right? There's a divide here between our interests and someone else's interest. And we need to like really pare it down and say, what is the world building that is absolutely necessary, that is most important, and that will, sort of trick this person probably into getting interested in the story and then maybe being involved in the rest of it as we go deeper. And I think that's where these, those little nuances, those things that make the world tick, that are small, are definitely things that you can explore in your game, right? But like tiny nuances, inter-character conflicts might not grab your reader right off the bat. Yeah, lol, it's not just writing, it's many things I'm interested. Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense, right? That a mind like that sort of gets interested in scope, and then these projects get out of hand, would become, interested in art and writing because there's so much space, right? Writing has so much space to world build, to explore, to have this scope that is very different from other forms of art, right? A painting has a much more limited scope. Painters just generally have a more limited scope than writers. Uh, Not their fault. It's just the art form, right? A painting can only get so big. An installation can only get so big. Musicians have scope. If it's a performed piece, then it can't, go so long that your musicians start dropping dead on stage. And electronic musicians maybe experiment with these things and these like experimental music things that go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. Um, but dancers, playwrights, there's a scope in the performance, and writing is this really curious art because it doesn't care. And that's a very dangerous thing for some of us. For it sounds like you and for a number of my friends who are avid world builders, is it can just go forever because you can zoom in infinitely, right? You can world build the smallest object as a writer. You can give the backstory of you know this pen and why it's important, and you can spend pages talking about this pen. And then you can zoom out to like the scale of the cosmos, the next sentence. And that's a really powerful and dangerous thing in our art form. In my experience, world building can be a bit of a trap for beginning writers. You might have a great world to build, but if your characters are bland, your story won't be interesting. Yeah, they're just different skills, right? And and I talked about this the other day with poetry. I was talking about writing and performance, and if we put it on like a graph, a lot of people start writing and then they don't start performing until they've reached like a certain threshold where they feel like they're good enough, right? So they reach the threshold, and then at this point, and only at this point, do they start, performing their poetry. And then they realize like that their performing isn't very good. Their performing is way doesn't match the level of their actual writing. They can't say with their words what the text is saying because they don't have the practice. And I think it's the same with world building, right? If we draw the same graph, it's basically the same graph, right? You start world building and you make this world, you make this world, you make this world. It's your favorite world. It's the best thing ever. I want to use a better color, right? And then once it reaches a certain threshold of, okay, my world is like done enough, I can start writing. You haven't practiced writing at all. And then you're gonna, like, sometimes this leads you to hate your world. And it's very sad that this happens to people. It's happened to me. I'm like, wait, like, this happened to me with DMing. I would world build a ton, right? I would world build a ton, and then I'd run my campaign, and my DMing and my players' involvement just didn't live up to the story that I wanted to tell, right? We were down here as storytellers, and the world was up here, and my ambitions were up here. But, right, uh, ideally, when we're an artist, we try to have balance, right? We try to there's like people yelling in my house. We start performing as soon as we can, and we we write our poetry and we world build and we, do all these things, and then they sort of grow together. And these things also have a way of supplementing each other, because you'll realize as you have experience as a world builder that you need to like write in a certain way that involves your world building. You maybe start to write your poetry with performance in mind once you have performance as a skill. Um, and this, you know, it's just important to not deny yourself practice, right? Deny yourself practice when you could just start it now. I'm gonna close my door. Like conversations. Everyone came home. All right. Try to unstick my hair. So be thou wrecked. You say, in your experience, world building is a trap. Not a trap, right? It some people can be trapped by it. But you need a world build, It's a skill to learn. And some people just get very, very excited about world building. And that can be too excited. Too excited. I mean, there's no too excited. If you love world building, world build. I've known people who just world built for the sake of world building, and they're like, I have no intention of doing anything with this. I just like making worlds. And that's okay, right? But if you're world building with the interest of writing, write as well. Are we talking about world building? Yeah, we definitely are. It's basically a genre of its own. Yeah. And one way to navigate this is, let's say you don't want to start writing your book until you have enough of your world. That's okay. I think that's actually a reasonable impulse. You want to make sure there's enough set in stone that things don't start changing. But I think the remedy to this is, instead of waiting to write anything, right? Start world building. Create your first town, right? And before you go on to the next scale of creating the town next to it and the nearby cities in the nation, write a short story, right, in this town. It doesn't have to be your book. It doesn't have to be your campaign. Just a vignette, a story, a little something, right? So you get this experience. And then you world build some more, right? And you write some more short stories, and you write some more things. Then you're practicing your writing. You're getting better, and you're also teaching yourself how to write within this world. Even if you're a great writer, you might still need to practice writing within this particular world building. And this helps you stay, caught up with that. Yeah. That's my world building spiel. I like those ideas. Maybe that means I should start writing short stories in the world that I'm world building for my D&D campaign or tabletop RPG campaign that I probably won't run for more than a year, right? Start telling stories within it. Yeah. You see, for me, it was the opposite. When I started writing, it was plot and character relationships that I remember that were the first to get out of hand, as it were. But you could argue that making more events and characters requires more world for them to be part of and take place in. But that's just me and my experience. Yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone else. Not for everyone else, for everyone, right? Everyone has a different experience in how that sort of happens, and which things we resonate with, and what we gravitate toward. And I think the important thing is that none of this is particularly prescriptive. It's just that in any art, writing, poetry, painting, dancing, there are a number of different skills that make up the art, if you're a dancer, you need to have like your expressiveness on stage. Maybe you need to be able to move fluidly. Maybe you need like a degree of athleticism. Maybe there's an aspect of like understanding music and rhythm. I'm not sure. Not a dancer. And if you really focus on just athleticism, being very strong and being able to jump around stage and do all these things, but you don't focus on being able to move fluidly and beautifully, right? You're not going to dance well, you know? And etc. All the different things. Goes for any art, goes for any, probably anything at all, right? If you're a mathematician, you need to learn many different kinds of math and skills. If you're a salesperson, you need to learn your sales industry, right? But you also need to learn like the dealing with people part, and you need to learn like the time management, and you need to learn like the not burning yourself out to get your commission. And if you neglect any one of these, you probably kind of fail. I also struggle a bit with writing, especially longer prosaic texts, even though both my worlds and characters are quite good, if I do say so myself. And I usually create a complete plot outline to know exactly what I want to write. Though I guess that's mostly an issue of phrasing / being able to write a good string of sentences that portrays what I come up with and write. Yeah, there's like, that's a skill, right? Just the sort of very mechanical, like, getting from start to finish. It's very hard to, even if you have all the ideas and you have a world and you have so much built, right? There is a mechanical, mental, creative act of actually writing the whole book. And sometimes, no matter how much you like it, it can just be very, very difficult to actually get it done. So another one of those skills, the sort of endurance of creation. I do not have good endurance when it comes to creation. I get really excited about projects and flare out when they take too long. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's all for this this piece. I think we've had some good discussions about this one, but I will open it up to any other questions about things that we've been talking about. I think the world building discussion may continue after the break that is coming up, but just if there's anything left about this particular piece that we read, now would be the time to comment and ask. Oh yeah, I genuinely tried making another Warhammer story just for the fun of it, but once I tried translating those ideas to text, I couldn't put words on the page that I was happy with. Yeah, words on the page is a skill. Thanks. Thank you, Alec Man. Really appreciate you submitting this. I love getting writing from all different genres, right? And we could arguably classify this as fan fiction, but this is an entirely different genre from short story, from fan fiction, right? Because it has this like specific functional use, and it was really cool to read it and talk about it, and I don't know, learn a little bit tangentially about Warhammer. So yeah, thank you, many thanks for. I'm gonna like tuck some of this behind for, oh man, I'm gonna like fix my hair and then the break is gonna happen and I'm gonna take the headphones off. See, this is how it should be. Just a couple little guys. This side, oh, this is, yeah. Can you explain some of the notes and what they mean? Also, where can I find a link to your YouTube channel? I'd like to be able to go back and rewatch this later. Yeah, so YouTube saves the the things on its own, because that's what happens when you stream on YouTube. So, I mean, it's just 2/3 Lotus. It's the same as my stream. So it might be linked somewhere within, like, if you maneuver around links and stuff. Yeah, I'm just multi-streaming, and really, like, there's not really anyone ever in YouTube chat, but it does save it. But you have to. It doesn't, like, show up in, like, the videos. I think there's a tab called Live, and then it will show the recordings of all the stream, but it doesn't show in, like, the normal video section, like where you would land if you just went to someone's channel. Yeah. Oh, can you explain some of the notes and what they mean? Yeah, I mean, the notes are. I mean, I think a lot of this was me talking about really positioning the division between the two sides of the council or whatever. Most of this was probably just me scribbling as I was explaining things. I was talking about how I liked the flow of the speech, right? The notes over here, right? When we're writing, if we have an objective, it is useful, right? One objective we can have is, like the one that we had here, the movie trailer, the getting the players excited. Another objective we talked about when I mentioned Toni Morrison and The Bluest Eye was she just wanted to write a book for herself, and that was very different, and that would be very different than what you're doing. Talked about Vonnegut and fiction writing as action and characterization, and anything that doesn't do one of those two things is shouldn't be in. That's an aggressive way of thinking about it, but I do like it. World building. We are interested almost always in everything we world build, but we have to sell that to someone, so we have to make it interesting, hook them to get them interested in the details. I was talking about a potential process for self-critique and, like, just an idea for myself. This is just really me, like, speaking out loud, but the idea that to self-critique, we need to understand our goals and our intentions. And then these graphs about making sure that the different skills as artists don't get left behind, and that we sort of keep pace with all the different things required of our art form, rather than leaving behind something until a certain point, thinking that we will magically be able to do it then because something else is good enough, which is not a good way to approach things. Like a poet, writing until their writing is good enough, and then performing, and then their performance is lacking. So, I appreciate you asking that. I feel like that's something that I am very open. That's a question that I love to sort of go back through, because I feel like, we do these analyses of things, and especially with the poems, right? They get to be, like, quite messy. And to say something like, hey, can we go back through, right, and just review the things we talked about, is kind of not a bad question at all, right? Okay. I have a work in progress about magical fantasy world. The world building is hazy and full of loops. Yeah, but it's going. It's always hard. My world building for my sci-fi thing that I'm making is quite hazy right now, so understandable. Anyway, we are going to take a brief break. During this break, I would invite you to stand up, to look away from a screen, to move your body, get a snack or drink water if you want. Go to the bathroom if you need. Do something good for your body and your mind and your soul. Yeah, move your body. Yeah, I know, y'all. It's easy to just like sit and park yourself in front of a screen for a long time. And I am inviting you all, giving you all the opportunity to like, you know, move a little bit. If you're able, you know, I don't want to tell someone to move who like is in chronic pain. Uh, so all of that in mind. Move and do something good for yourself to the best of your ability, whatever that looks like in your situation and context, and we'll be right back in a few minutes. Hello. Welcome back. I am still here. And I'm putting my headphones back on. Gotta look good or whatever for stream. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. We're back. We are back for real. For reals. We're gonna do another writing from someone, probably. Well, like we are. It's not really like a I mean I guess it's always probabilistic, right? Like it's like a David Hume kind of situation. Uh maybe not quite a David Hume. Is his name David? Is it David Hume? Is it something else Hume? It might just not be David. What's Hume's first name? Hume, philosopher. It's David, right? David Hume. Look at that. Empirical philosophy. Yeah. Cool guy. Haven't read anything by him. But hey, whatever. Okay. Y'all were saying a bunch of things during the break, I feel like. uh, uh, yeah. Um, y'all said lots of things. Okay. You said you'll eventually submit the second part of Leckman. Awesome. Take your time. Talk about stuff. Yes, we read poetry. I do poems, I do prose, I do any kind of writing is open to be submitted by chat, and I read it and I talk about it and all of that. Do my fingers typing in chat count as body movement? Be that wrecked. You know, it's healthy. It's healthy to stand up. It's good for your circulation. I think it genuinely like takes years off your life if you're not like moving every hour. So I don't know. Are we here? That sounds kind of metaphysical. I'm here. Y'all are here. You're not illusions. For real, no cap. Yeah. I know someone named David, but we're not thinking the same person. Yeah, probably. Do I know any Davids? I'm not sure if I know any Davids, like, in present time. Like, I had a teacher named David in middle school, but I don't know if I know any Davids. I feel like the Davids that I know are out there, like, screaming at the fact that I don't remember them and who they are in this moment. So, I'm sorry to any Davids who considered themselves my friends, but now know that I don't remember them. Who has writing submitted to me? I think Ishmael is pulling pretty hard for Ishmael to have Ishmael's poetry read. Ray is sending a dinosaur, which probably means you have something. You know, 3 Davids. I know like 3 Erics. I might know 4, which is crazy. You have something that could be read, but it's narrative, not poem. I feel like I'm feeling poetry right now, definitely, because we just read prose. And yesterday I was sort of like craving poetry analysis, and then I got distracted by other stuff, so I never did it. Nikki, you've got a bid in naturally. me. Yeah. Me next. Okay. Wait, so I can sort by the tags? Oh my gosh. Whoa. Cabbage has stuff, but we just read yours, right? We read yours like last stream, so we'll wait on a Cabbage. You're so far down the freaking line. Didn't we read you like recently as well, Nikki? Oh, we read Swans. It was Nikki and Cabbage last stream. So yeah, I think Ishmael stocks are looking pretty good. I have a poem. Can I share it on Discord? Yeah. So the way the Discord works, I can show you, is there's all the bullshit in the Discord, like the text chat and writing. Writing is not the place to actually share your poem for stream. You go to stream submissions, like forum, and then you can like make a new post. Ideally, you would like read the rules if you were someone who does that, but I think most people don't or haven't. It's got 12 little hearts on it. That's actually pretty good. And then you can drop in your poem. If the text fits in a single Discord message, that works. Just, you know, formatting at that point is on you. Or you can send a file, or you can send a screenshot of a file. I like screenshots because I can just save them and then drop them in here. Otherwise, I'll be taking a screenshot of whatever you send, probably. But I think for now, we're doing Ishmael for this moment in time. And it is the poem you said that you wrote in another language, right? I think it's titled that or something. Or poem written in a language I don't know. Which I feel like there's some comment on the idea of things getting lost in translation here. I'm almost creating meta-analysis of your poem before I even read it, right? Because yeah, Ishmael, the me next doesn't do anything. It's just there to waste points. Right. So it's a language that you don't really know, that you then wrote in, I think, your native language, Turkish. Unless you wait, no, you wrote it in the language you didn't know. Right. Wait, did you write it in the language you didn't know? Like you actually wrote it but then you translated it to English, right? And all of that is a lens through like your first language being another language, which I think is fascinating, right? As a concept for a poem, and we'll see if we find it to turn out poetic and exciting and cool. I certainly hope it is, and I hope it is an enjoyable poem. Although, I suppose there's always a world where poetry doesn't succeed at that. Okay, did I fill up the whole... Let me scroll down further. Okay, cool. Getting the page set up. Welcome, Cal of Ethero. That's a cool... Ethero, like ether. But it's not, because it has a Y or something. I sort of half read it. Welcome in. This is a stream where people send me their poetry and their writing, and I read it, and I talk about it, and I scribble on it, and we talk about all sorts of fun things to learn about, and everyone has a grand old time, and there's very little, I don't know, cortisol here. You wrote it in Kannada, which is a language from India, which you don't know. And then translated it to another language, which is wild. Okay, it's the name of a world I created. Makes sense. And is there a way to share poetry here? Yeah, so you join the Discord, you go into stream submissions, you read the rules, and you send stuff. And I read it eventually. This very well might be the last poem of this stream today, because I went for a run last night, so my throat is kind of like... It's very dry here, so my throat got very dry. So I think my voice is tired more quickly. Anyway, so we have the poem in the original Kannada, which I cannot read and is essentially not very helpful. I'm not even going to try to read it for pronunciation sake. But we have the English translation here. And... yeah, I guess I will ask you, Ishmael, as I read this poem, before I jump into it, are there any questions that you have? Any things you would like me to focus on? Anything? I can recite the original at your request. I don't know how pronunciation in Kannada works. Nor do I know what these words mean, but I can say them. Other than that, any other questions that you would like me to consider as I read this poem? things you would like me to focus on, thoughts, notions to meditate upon as we read this work that is somewhat lost in the world of translation. Does this have a title? I don't think it has a title. So it's just a poem in a language that you don't know, or you don't know very well, right? You know it well enough to write some of this poem. And I will try to read this. Nana talayali shakti mugidaga. Ondu mara nana mulegala mele. A maravanu nanu maduveyade. Sundara marake nana nenapide. Mara badukalu nirugalu beku nirige gothila mulegalu ila adare marake niru nudutade I marevu bage marada marevu matu marada maduve. And in English, a language I do know. When no power is left in my head, a tree on top of my bones, I married that tree. The beautiful tree has my memory. Tree needs water to live. Water doesn't know. Water has no bones. But water speaks to the tree of forgetfulness, the tree's forgetfulness, and the tree's marriage. Fascinating, right? Because we have this sort of reflection. I think I like the way that you've translated this, probably. Because I'd imagine your grammar is probably not great, right? In a language that you are not very good at, or that you say you don't know. And so to preserve that in translation, to preserve the feeling of something not quite being well written, tree needs water to live, right? And then these very simple phrases, the beautiful tree has my memory, right? A tree on top of my bones. It's cool because we have this sort of poetic sensibility, this metaphorical, symbolic approach, this capacity to tell something that I think very clearly has this kind of like metaphorical and artistic intention behind it. That's very developed because you've been writing poetry for quite some time. But then we're sort of fundamentally limited by the language itself. And that's a really cool layer, for this poem. The fact that we're kind of speaking through something that doesn't quite speak for us, right? There's a friction, I think, just inherent to the concept of the poem. And maybe this has some relation to the meaning of the poem itself. I think that would be quite, another layer of poeticism there if it were to. But I'm going to read the poem again, the whole thing, to get another sort of zoomed out view of what this might be saying, what it feels, what it is. And I think from here on, I'm mostly going to focus on the English. Although I think this idea, so I actually really like Ishmael. I will say this, that when you present this poem to me and you present this poem in a language you don't know, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to read the English. You ask, right? Can I recite the original also? Because this is creating that same friction, right? This, for me, literally creates the feeling of a poem in a language I don't know. And it sort of asks this question of me, right? Can I find beauty in something unfamiliar? And it asks the question of you when you wrote it, right? Can you create beauty when you don't have skill, or maybe a sort of mechanical technique when you are limited by, not by expression, but by, I would say, mechanics, right? Because you have this expressive ability no matter what as a poet, and maybe I as a reader have the ability to interpret beauty from something, uh, even if I can't understand it. So maybe that's a strong argument to uh, keep reading, right? Keep reading the original, and keep experiencing the friction of something that I don't understand. So I think I will take it. We'll sort of take this as one piece then, maybe One Piece, like the anime. Nana Talayali. Maybe I'll actually get better at reading it as I go, hopefully. Nana Talayali Shakti Mugidaga. Ondu Maranana Mulegala Mele. A Maravanu Nanu Maduveyade. It's interesting, I'm, commenting, right? Because this is illustrating, right, differences in language, and like this approximation that happens in translation, and sounds that are impossible in English or that don't exist in English. This has all, like, this language, Kannada, has like a lot of like double letter things, and it also has, it looks like, long vowels, or maybe these are like double vowels. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know how to pronounce this. Mu'ulegala, sorry, or meele, or is it just a long vowel? Mele, right? Where one is and one is right? That's sort of a question that I can't answer. I can answer by looking it up, but I almost think that is sort of self-defeating, right? Marake or Marake? Marak, right? There are languages that have like a doubled vowel, Marake, where it's a stop, Marak, and then K, right? Marake, as opposed to Marake. So it's cool. It illustrates sort of another layer of this separation, of this difference, of this incomprehensibility. I think there's also an interesting question to be asked, right? Presented a poem in a language that you don't know. Uh, of course, we have this one down here, but presented in a language we don't know, whether this can still be beautiful, right? Can this still be beautiful? And if I listen to someone read a poem in French, and they speak that poem, and they inflect that poem and perform that poem in such a way that carries emotion, right? Can that still be beautiful for me as an experiencer of art? I would argue yes is the answer to that question. And actually what I think of is the comedian Andy Kaufman, who, absolute genius of comedy. But there's a bit of one of his performances where he basically does a whole section in gibberish, right? He's not actually speaking comprehensible language, but he's using tone and inflection, and pacing to sort of suggest the idea of a joke, right? To suggest a narrative. And he's doing crowd work. So he like asks a question in gibberish to someone in the audience, and they don't really say anything, and then he sort of asks it again in gibberish again, and then he like looks to the side and makes some comment that feels snarky, even though there is no content to that comment. And then, he sort of like says something apologetic, but it's all gibberish, and it's very funny. And I think I could imagine myself listening to another poet speaking an entire poem in a language that I don't know, and because of the way they perform it, it can still feel powerful. And maybe that's something to try here. I could almost use this poem as a personal exercise uh, to try to perform this poem in a way that it's effective, right? Of course, I have this little advantage of sort of maybe knowing the direction of this poem and knowing maybe the tone and what it if I decide, right, this start is sad and then it kind of gets happy and then it gets angry and then it resolves. That's just me making shit up, right? That's just me making shit up. But I could read this one in the same way with that same sort of shape. And maybe even though I'm speaking a language that I don't know, I might be able to perform something beautiful. I can try that. That might be a very different direction to this analysis than we would normally do, right? And we'll start by maybe like looking at this one normally and talking about the meaning of the words I can understand. So this might be me spitballing, but in my opinion, if it's another language, but you're the one trying to understand it, it could be seen as not so much art and more of a chore, right? If someone who's read the language was standing in front of you and reading aloud, motioning with their hands, expressing what it feels like, to me that would be more poetry than what was previously said. Yeah, I think me like going in and trying to like perform this poem in such a way that carries emotion is certainly a bit of an arbitrary challenge, right? That being said, I think arbitrary challenges is usually what we call like practice as artists, right? And I mean, let's say for example, like let's say you're a poet and you're wanting to get better at performing poetry. So you take a book of poetry like this one. These exist. The Poetry of Pablo Neruda. And a bunch of this is in Spanish, right? Oda al viejo poeta. Mi dio la mano como si un árbol, right? I don't really know that much Spanish. But I can like read the words. I could, hypothetically, read the English version, Ode to an Aged Poet, understand the performance and the inflection of it, and what I want to say, the emotions I want to communicate. And then I could go read the Spanish one and try to communicate those same emotions without relying on the words. In the same way of our sort of Andy Kaufman gibberish comedy. Instead, it's just a poetry with a language we don't know. That could be a very useful tool, right? A useful practice, certainly an unconventional one, as a way to try to perform feeling. But yeah, it is sort of chore-like. It seems sort of difficult. It seems like no one here speaks Kannada since you asked, Ishmael. I think that's good because it means no one was absolutely cringing at me trying to speak their language. Anyway, speaking of me trying to read their language, Mara Badukalu Nirugalu Beku. Nirige Gotila Mulegalu Ila Adare Marake Niru Nudutare I Marevu Bage Marada Marevu Matu Marada Maduve. It's like Evu and Uve. It's kind of, there's a lot of like alliterative feel in this. It actually like feels very poetry. Marada Marevu Mata Marada Maduve. Like literally, right? We have like alliteration happening, kind of 5 things straight. I think like we could almost analyze this in a way of being like, there's alliteration here and there's like, sort of like some rhyme structure maybe happening, but not wholly interested in that. Anyway, let's look at the actual poem. We've been talking too long about language and not the actual poem itself. When no power is left in my head, a tree on top of my bones. I married that tree. The beautiful tree has my memory. Tree needs water to live. Water doesn't know. Water has no bones, but water speaks to the tree of forgetfulness, of the tree's forgetfulness, and the tree's marriage. So this almost becomes a sort of puzzle with the whole like meta-analysis and understanding of the poem, because we know that this poet has, this degree of like poetic ability and sensibility, and is probably trying to like communicate something specific that they don't have words for, right, in the other language. And thus we resort to like basic imagery, trees and bones and water, like words that are easy and common to like express something else. And so we can almost like maybe look at this poem through its symbols, right? When no power is left in my head. And I think this maybe reads to me as something like tiredness, right? Or it could even be something like sad and depressed, right? The inability to do anything, willlessness. It could even be as far as like helpless, right? It could be death, to have no power in one's head. There are so many ways to read this line, and I think that's something really cool, and maybe one could almost practice this in one's own language to simplify things down. Say like, I can only use very basic words, and I'm going to communicate like a very high level metaphorical thought. I think that would be a very fun exercise to do. When no power is left in my head, a tree on top of my bones. and again, I think this has a number of readings. And as I go through these, I think if anyone in chat has like ways that you would read one of these lines, definitely chime in. This could be death again. And maybe looking for these parallels could tell us something about the poem, right? A tree on top of my bones. I am buried. I am in the dirt. My bones are there, and there is a tree above me. That could be death. This could also be an elaboration upon head, right? There is no power left in my head, a tree on top of my bones. And thus it is saying in some capacity that one's head is a tree on top of one's bones. Maybe this has something to do with the mind, right? The head, the tiredness, the sadness. So my bones, as in sort of my skeleton and my body, and my head is a tree, something that grows, something that extends from my physical form. So that could be the mind, right? The mind is something that grows beyond the sort of physical of the bones, on top, as in some a higher order place. Those are, I think, maybe the two ways that I most read it. I mean, there could almost be like a reading of like hair here, right? Leaves and such as a literal sort of imagery. I married that tree. The beautiful tree has my memory. And I think, right, the tree has my memory, the tree on top of my bones. Maybe these things all contribute to the idea of the mind. But to marry it, right? To marry it is very interesting. And I think, marry we could read as some other word, right? Marriage has these meanings that look like union, or like a promise, or like a sort of unending connection, right? To be like together until death. which maybe has a cool connection with our sort of like other reading of death in the rest of the work, right? That we can read it as such. Um, so I am connected to this mind. I am married to it in that I cannot escape my own mind. Uh, there, like I am helpless and I am tired, and my brain feels like a tree. This thing stretching out from me that is separate, uh, but I am tied to it in a way. And maybe there's this idea here cropping up of like the connection uh, of body and mind, right? As we're talking about the head and the bones and like a marriage, right? We have this idea maybe of some kind of body mind connection thematically cropping up, and I think marriage is something that feels like that. These two things that are inseparable and dependent on each other. Lotus, I'm planning on wearing a tight femboy bunny suit with a Scottish man's kilt. Pop off. I would wear a tight femboy bunny suit. um, anyway, tree needs water to live. So we have this tree that I think for now we're allowing to be interpreted as the mind, right? And so the tree needs something to live, right? Some sustenance metaphorically here, something to fuel the mind. Water doesn't know. Water has no bones. So then that says like water, this thing that we are trying to describe, right? Maybe if we're thinking in the process of these very, very abstract symbols, has no physical content, right? There is something non-physical that this brain sort of has a requirement to function, right? But water speaks to the tree, so there's sort of this like connection between the water and the mind and the bones, but the water itself doesn't have any and it doesn't know. Uh, I almost think like you could read this water to like lean into the meta analytic side of this poem as language, right? We have this idea of the mind with no power, the mind without language. And so this poem is almost a poem about the confrontation of the inability to speak, right? When no power is left in my head. A tree on top of my bones. I married that tree. The beautiful tree has my memory. And this thing we've grown, this thing we've cultivated, maybe of our own experience. Um, and it requires this water, this language, this experience, this context that we have separate from body, sort of a not knowledge or not knowing itself because it is knowledge. Um, but water speaks to the tree of forgetfulness, of the tree's forgetfulness, right? So we have this water speaking in a way that we cannot access it, that we cannot drink, because it is married to something else. It is married to another kind of water. It's married to a language that we're not using here. That's one way to go with this poem. I think there are probably, you know, this is a poem that I think if we really let the symbols run loose in this way, has just countless interpretations. I mean, every poem does, but this one, more variety of interpretations and more flexibility with how we can read it, especially when we dip into like the meta-analytic sort of like diptych presentation, two poems, language, translation, knowledge. And I think the reality of this poem is any interpretation will feel like a stretch. Like, I probably said a bunch of words, and there are probably maybe some number of people in chat who are like, I don't know, Imogen, water as language kind of feels like a stretch here, right? You know, tree as mind kind of feels like a stretch here, right? There's like a whole like tree. I mean, like tree of life, knowledge, fruit. I don't know. There's like some stuff there. But everything I think will feel like a stretch, and I think maybe that's just a beautiful fact of this poem. We can think of it as like an interpretive, artistic beauty, right? The fact that we are communicating imprecisely means everything we interpret from this poem is going to be imprecise, feel unfinished, feel like a stretch. And I think maybe that can almost act as a comment on language itself, right? Especially if we interpret the meaning of the poem, the water, the tree, from a linguistic perspective, that our context and our existence as people and our differences sort of makes communication fundamentally imprecise. And fundamentally, when we interact with other people, all we get is sort of like our best interpretations that feel like a stretch of what they might actually be saying and meaning. Um, when really they're speaking this and we're hearing this. Right, but this is a very curious art object, this poem, I think. Right, it has this, it really has this feeling, I think, akin to like modern art, right? Where there is art that is really, really strongly like wants to make the reader think about something. I think that's a lot of modern art is it's at a certain point we crossed a threshold where some artists started to care more about an intellectual message than a purely expressive or emotional one. And I don't think that's bad. It's a different way of making art. Uh, and the presentation of this poem as a poem in a language I don't know, right? Even the title has a degree of uncertainty because it is written. You do somewhat know this language, and half of it is in a language you don't know. But maybe, right? Maybe we could even see this title as applying to the whole piece as translation and as original, right? That all language is something we don't know, uh, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on speculating, but I think this poem really offers a lot to think about from like a sort of communication and philosophic, and I mean, there's even like, yeah, and like just in terms of like sort of philosophy on art and of art. Um, and I think this is something that is a useful thing to do in modern art, is to be very vague, right? This is why we see like maybe a wall that is red with a title, and it's a piece of modern art. That's why we see like a banana duct taped to a wall, and it's like modern art. Because the vagueness sort of leaves this capacity for thinking, for interpretation. I was talking to an old professor of mine recently, and he said that he thinks high art, the sort of high art, modern art sort of goal, that doesn't necessarily mean this is the goal of all art, just of some, is to maximize interpretation possible interpretations and like discourse and thought, while still sort of maintaining a coherent center, while still maintaining like a consistent, understandable idea that everything seems to come back to. And I actually think this poem does a remarkable job of accomplishing something like this, because from like an interpretive perspective of the text, this is a text that opens you up to so many meanings, and then those meanings inform probably how you understand the entire piece as a cohesive work. You know, that's all if I decide to interpret poem in a language I don't know as the title of this as a single cohesive piece, which I really love as an artistic statement. Like, I don't think that was your intention, Ishmael, because I know you and I know that you, or I know your writing and I know that you don't title your poems hardly ever. But like, this would be a killer title for this piece, you know? And then the piece is one poem in two different languages, because it creates this dialogue between the title of like, which of these is the language you don't know? Is the whole thing a language you don't know? Is poetry a language you don't know? You know, one of those very intellectual opportunities to question, to engage with the poem, to like ponder these ideas. It was not a title. Yeah, I'm going to interpret it as such for the sake of the thought experiment, because I think it's sort of like an accidental, really clever move. Like I like this poem most, I think, as poem in a language I don't know with the two poems presented. I think more than I would ever like this poem just presented like this or like this, because it creates dialogue on like 5 different levels of interpretation, you know, which is cool. It's intellectual. It's smart. I think it would be smart without being like too clever. It feels earnest, but it doesn't feel clever. I think it actually feels clever to just do this exercise or to just do this poem, but to like package them as an artistic statement feels has a lot of body, to me. I'm not sure how worthwhile it is to continue to like poke around at interpretations of this work, because truly it's so free. We were talking about the dream analysis earlier and how this can lead us into like so many different directions, right? And I think the same kind of goes for a poem that is this vague. It looks dreamlike, and we can sort of interpret it in so many different ways because it's not very tangible. You know, we can read When No Power Is Left in My Head vastly differently, right? Power, you know what? We're talking about electricity, right? There is no electricity in my head, and that can mean a number of things, right? You know, actually, we're going to interpret that as some sort of substance, right? Power, substance, electricity, like a drug, coffee, ecstasy, you know, a tree on top of my bones, right? This sort of tree, drug, right? This is a poem about weed. I married that tree. It's an addiction. The beautiful tree has my memory. This addiction has taken everything from me. The tree needs water to live. You know, it's sustained by my own life, by my own water, by my own existence, by my mental construction of addiction. Water doesn't know. Water has no bones because it's something mental. But the water speaks to the tree. It speaks to the substance, to the drug, the forgetfulness in the marriage. I'm married to this thing. Poem about addiction. You know? I don't think that's a horrible interpretation. Like, I don't think that's unjustified by the text. because everything is a logical leap, you know. Um, and there's the whole we could have followed the path of like reading the whole poem as death. Uh, maybe it's a poem about death, and that actually refers to the death of the author, and it's a high level artistic statement about how it's not making a statement, and people will go and read it however you want, and it's the death of the author. I get it because I'm not sure that this poem demands the reader to understand it through the lens of beauty, in a way. Like, I think this poem feels intellectual through and through. Right? This poem was created as an exercise. I can't see it as a way other than that. Because it was like, the thought process was like, what if I write a poem in a language I don't know? And it's a really cool exercise, right? But I think poems that come from a place of exercise, that come from a place of like clever, often feel clever. And so it's just something in the art. It's something in the way it's presented. And so I read this poem and I want to read it like it's high art, right? Like it's modern art with interpretations and discourse and philosophic, content. High classics. Yeah. And I think more than like any other poem, this is one that I am uninclined to come to a personal interpretation of. I'll always talk about possible interpretations on stream, uh, because that's what I do. And usually I will privately sort of keep an interpretation to myself. I'll have like, yeah, I think this is what I like for the poem. This is how I want to read it. That's manifest in performance at the end as well when I read it again. But this poem like truly, um, I think illustrates the graph that I've drawn before on stream of specificity. Specificity graphed on the bottom. Interpretations we can flip the graph. It's not the specificity graph, it's the vagueness graph. So, as something is very not vague, very specific, no vagueness, means it has like a single interpretation, right? That's where all poetry starts. I don't know if actually anything can have a single interpretation, but we can get close. And as we continue, it goes up. And I think it extends into infinity. Whereas we get ultimately vague, we get to a like point where we create a work with like a truly infinite interpretive space. And I think more than any poem I've seen on stream before, like this might be the vaguest poem I've ever read. Which, but only if I read it in a certain way. Only if I read it as modern art, right? Only if I read it in the way you don't want me to read it. But I'm super curious about this idea, this super vague poem, this new frontier. Thus, I will choose to read your poem wrong for my own sake. Because I think it's a more appealing artistic statement to me, you know. The author is dead and I killed him. I just shot you in the face with my interpretation. You have a migraine. That's very unfortunate to hear. Classics are ace. Make sure you are, I don't, to turn your brightness down on your screen, or I don't know if it's open on another tab, but like look away from the screen, lay down if that helps, or sit up if that helps, water, if you have any caffeine and ibuprofen or any specific migraine stuff, make sure you're doing that. Migraines suck. For anyone who hasn't had a migraine before, holy shit. It's like death. It's been a stressful week. Got locked out of my Instagram. That's tragic. But I did see that you got back in. I think I saw your story. Yeah, I don't know. How vague is it as an English poem? I mean, necessarily less vague, I think, because there's less layers and there's less possible interpretation. It's still very vague. Like, but honestly, I can't separate this poem from the fact that it's not an English poem. You know? Like, I think this is a curious thing about the mind. It's sort of the thing where, like, if someone says their interpretation, if the author says their interpretation of a poem in chat, oftentimes it will kind of stymie my interpretation, even though I try to ignore the author's interpretation. It feels like they've done something unholy. And in this way, like, you can't unsee something once you've seen it. And I do not think it is possible for me to observe this poem as an English poem, right? My mind has already constructed these associations and connections of all of this as it relates to the fact, right? I have only ever read this and can only ever read this poem through its presentation as such. I mean, this is the burden of being an artist, right? This is the burden, is that everything we put on the page, everything we put outside the page, the cover we put on our book, and the way that we present it to someone, and how much it costs, impacts the way that the art is interpreted, right? The entire packaging around something. The fact that I'm reading this poem on stream means I will read it differently than if I was reading it sitting across from you at a table, which I've done with people's poetry. It's way more fun, way better than Twitch. Way different. My thought process. It's different from how I read poems alone. And that's not something we can, like, suspend. I can't suspend my disbelief in the way that I can with a fantasy book, right? In a fantasy operates through the suspension of disbelief. Disbelief to not believe in something, suspension to stop disbelieving. We disbelieve in magic in real life, but for fantasy to work, we have to suspend. We have to accept magic. And I'd sort of have to suspend belief. No, suspend disbelief. Because I'm taking this as the poem itself, even though I don't believe that it's the whole context of the work, right? So it's ignoring the disbelief of this new truth, or the acceptance of it, which isn't. I don't think it's possible. That being said, right, it's a very vague poem. I think it but honestly, as an artistic statement, like, I'm trying to imagine, like, if I looked at this poem with no context, and I would think, like, oh, this is kind of interesting. It's using, like, wrong grammar and simple terms, and I'd be like, okay, there's probably, like, I think I would still have a ton of different associations I'd be able to make through the symbols, right? I think that would be a way less enjoyable artistic experience for me than the one that I sort of constructed through the synthesis of all of this into a single artistic message. So do with that what you will. Of course, I'm not authority on what is good. I just have preference. And if you wanted to, create art that panders to people like me, you would, from here on, go forward presenting this as poem in a language I don't know, with a poem in Kannada and the same poem in English. I think this is totally the kind of poem that they would like accept into Poetry Magazine. You know, uh, it's so smart. Poetry Magazine has smart poetry, um, and they pay you $500 per poem. So, um, it's very intellectual. I like when presented as such, but and I think the intellectual beauty of the synthesized version outweighs to me any interest in the poems individually. Like I think it's really cool. I'm not sure if it's coming out as praise because I'm sort of praising something you didn't do, right? It's like you fell over and I said, "Wow, that was like really beautiful art." Not that this is falling over, but it's like you've you did something without realizing you did it, right? Uh, I I think people are maybe hesitant to claim that as art, but I think it's worth claiming, right? Because it's beautiful, and like you did do it. Yeah. Any questions? Any thoughts from chat or from you, Ishmael? For questions for Ishmael from chat, Ishmael to chat. Usually those don't work. Questions from chat to me or Ishmael to me, or questions for oneself, rhetorical questions to be pondered in a sort of empty thought space in the tree of the mind. All of those are welcome at this moment. Before we wrap up this poem, which I will read the whole thing again, including the Kannada, and then probably wrap up stream from there, because 5-hour streams really like destroy my mind. I like 3-hour streams. Cabbage chose violence in the Discord. I hope that is in like the sort of humorous sense of chose violence and not like it's like blowing up the server kind of violence. I don't think I have any mods in the Discord. It's probably bad. I don't know if I ever modded anyone in the Discord. I'm not sure. Anyway, sounds like there are no questions. Who is Cabbage? Cabbage is Cole. Cabbage is something Cole. I don't know their username, but they wanted to be called Cabbage instead, so they're Cabbage. Damp Fender Cole. Okay. Sounds like there's no other questions or thoughts on this poem. So I will read this as my interpretation of this work. Poem in a language I don't know. Nana talayali shakti mugidaga. Ondu mara nana mulegala mele amaravanu nanu maduveyade. Sundara marake nana nenapide. Marabadakalu nirugalu beku nirige gotila mulegalu ila. Adare marake niru nudutare I marevu bage marada marevu matu marada maduve. When no power is left in my head, a tree on top of my bones, I married that tree. The beautiful tree has my memory. Tree needs water to live. Water doesn't know. Water has no bones, but water speaks to tree of forgetfulness, of the tree's forgetfulness, and the tree's marriage. poem in a language I don't know. Not gonna lie, I did expect more bones and water talk. I feel like you fell into the trap of expecting anything particular from me. You know, I feel like I'm someone obsessed with the novel. I'm someone obsessed with something interesting and new and different. And I love doing things in new ways. And I think that manifests on stream a lot, where I'm always finding new ways to talk about the same things. You know, new paths to talk about interpreting poetry, right? When we were talking about performance all the time for like the last week and a half, and maybe that's like tapering off. So it's, I don't know. Maybe that's on you. Maybe that's on you for expecting anything. But thank you so much for submitting your work, and thank you to whoever it was that submitted the work earlier, the intro, the prologue. I forgot which username it was. Yes, Elec. What is their full elect? I don't remember what their username is. Elect man or something. So thank you to both of you. It's always my deepest pleasure to be able to read the work that you submit and send, and the stream does not occur truly without y'all, right? Sending stuff. We're gonna raid, I think. There's a channel that I apparently follow called Stacy the Linguist, and since we were talking so much about language today, I think it fits nicely, the idea of rating them. Their stream is titled "We Have Found the White Whale," so maybe they're reading Moby Dick. So as we raid, make sure to bring them lots of love. Thank you so much for watching. Keep making art you love and keep finding beauty in the world. I've been Imogen. Thank you all so much. Bye.